Welcome back to Close Up. This is one of the busiest times at the State House in Concord as lawmakers rush to get all of their bills out, crossing over from House to Senate and Senate to House. This morning we get to check in on some key issues with the House Republican leader, Representative Jason Osborne. Mr. Majority Leader, thanks for joining us here in studio.
Hey, great to be here, Adam. Thank you. And we're in your place of business today, so it's just Jason.
Okay, all right. Let's start with cannabis. You're a limited government guy. Your caucus has signed a no new taxes pledge, but this year's vehicle to legalize marijuana includes that 15% tax on cultivation. Now, the House is decisively pro-legalization. You've got bills that aren't even the intended vehicle just flying off the floor on voice votes and passing. So the argument really isn't there anymore one way or the other. The House wants to pass these things. But how do you get your conservatives to come along on the idea of passing what has to be essentially a new tax on a new policy?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not even trying to, right? The whole point of getting behind this bill was really to give a vehicle for all of my members on both sides of the issue a chance to interact with members on the other side of the aisle who are on both sides of the issue. There are very few topics that we have to deal with in the legislature that have just always been nonpartisan, and this is a good one to work with.
So I guess the governor and the Senate president are kind of the obstacles, if you will, here in getting cannabis, legal cannabis, across the finish line. What are the chances we see some kind of grand bargain struck in the process here? Obviously, in 2021, you very effectively used the budget trailer bill, whether people like it or not, as a vehicle for some policy changes. Could we see that again, that maybe you get your cannabis bill, Senate President Bradley maybe gets his bail reform fix, maybe we see Medicaid expansion in there, maybe we see parental rights? Am I on the right track here, or am I being fanciful, like writing a screenplay?
Well, anything's possible, and we're still a long way from that point in time. Right now, we're in the process of putting all the pieces on the chessboard, if you will, and we haven't even started making our moves yet.
Let's talk about one of those bills I just mentioned, the Parental Bill of Rights. Democrats are coming after this very hard, even though it is scaled back a bit from what was talked about last year in terms of the must notify parents versus now parents having to be informed if they ask a question of a school. Democrats are portraying the bill as anti-gay, anti-trans. What's the response to that?
This is really unfortunate to see, and this is again why I tried to start with the easy issues and work our way up to the more complex ones. We're only 3 months into the term, so it's not a real surprise that we haven't been able to get some consensus. I know it's there. It's got to be, because this is really about who are the parents of your children. Is it you, or is it the state?
Do you think you could win any Democratic votes here?
Given enough time and enough trust building, I think it's definitely possible.
Attendance is obviously playing a huge role in what moves and what doesn't on a given day, and Republicans have generally been pretty good at holding their majority in a de facto sense with the numbers on a daily basis. Just the other day, though, you had a racial profiling bill that passed over the objections of the vast majority of the Republican caucus. Explain, why do you think that's a bad idea to ban the idea of law enforcement and sentencing racial profiling in New Hampshire?
I think the argument that was made was that it's not needed because it's already illegal, and this was really more of a statement-making exercise than it was actually changing law enforcement procedures.
Right. Relying on the federal aspect, though, that's not necessarily the New Hampshire way, and we have a motorcycle profiling law already. So do you see any argument there that, you know, motorcycle riders are protected, but no one else? Yeah,
well, I think you'll see that the Speaker himself didn't vote on that bill, and that's, I imagine, precisely the reason. So.
Let's talk about an incident that unfolded here in the last couple of weeks. Representative Greason up in Wentworth getting into this confrontation with a plow truck driver and being arrested for simple assault. Does he have to apologize? I know in a statement that he made, he said he apologized to the plow truck driver, but does he have to offer a greater mea culpa to the public for his actions?
Yeah, you know, that's up to him, and it's up to his voters to decide whether that's a good enough response or if they want more. I routinely stay out of the business of other people's personal interactions when they're off of the legislative clock. I care about what happens on the House floor, on the State House complex. If I had to worry about what 400 members do outside of that area, I don't think there's enough time in my day to deal with it.
And yet, from a leadership perspective, that's something that's evolved over the years. And certainly, I mean, I know that leadership hasn't weighed in other situations, but partisans always like to jump on both sides when things like this happen. But shouldn't the leadership stand for something to say, well, this is wrong and that's not right?
It's a good question. As you might have noticed, I like to do things a little differently than they have been done in the past, and it's just not my style. Those are the kinds of things I deal with behind closed doors, whether it's on my side of the aisle or theirs. When I have issues with Democratic members, we talk to their leadership and let them handle it, and I kind of expect the same courtesy on my side.
Circling back to the budget, and obviously we have a unique situation this year in that Governor Chris Sununu is kind of dabbling in presidential politics. We don't know if he's going to run or not. Do you think that process might end up making him more conservative, that you might get more of what you want out of this budget process because he's thinking about appealing to a broader Republican, more conservative base on the national level?
That's certainly possible, and I'm still not even sure if he's actually considering a higher office. Whatever it is that he's up to, I think it's good for the state of New Hampshire. Traveling around the country, just telling everyone how great this state is and encouraging business to move here, and that's really, I think, the primary job of the governor is to be a cheerleader for the state, and there's probably no one better at it than he is.
How would you describe that relationship with the governor right now? There has been some friction over policy and style in the past.
Sure. This is the part where I don't answer your question, right?
But it sounds you're striking a different tone yourself.
You know, he's very busy, too busy for little people like me. So I encourage him to do exactly what he's doing, and doing a great job at it.
So a lot of Democrats were skeptical late last year when you said they're going to get to see a different side of Jason Osborne. It was almost like they were saying, "Oh, really, Darth Vader's going to be our friend now," or something like that. But just the other day, there was a unanimous consent speech when one of the Democrats got up and said, "Oh, gosh, it's so much fun working with you now." So what has changed? What are you doing differently?
Well, I don't think he was talking about me. I think he was talking about one of my colleagues. But I get it. I do try to be as fun as I can possibly be, and I think that there's an age gap, I think, that is problematic. I was raised on South Park, for example, and some of the members that are a little older than I am don't really kind of get where I'm coming from. And now as I'm getting older, I'm starting to see that I've got the same issue with the younger folks coming in, and I guess I'm just trying to broaden my ability to interact with a wider audience.
All right. Well, Majority Leader Jason Osborne will be keeping track of things up there at the State House. Thanks for joining us on Close Up.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
Appreciate it.